best wish from the Balkans. Once in heaven there were two angels, an optimist and a pessimist, and they were arguing. And the pessimist said, "There are no good people left on earth. Everybody on earth is selfish and horrible." And the optimist said, "That's not true. There's plenty of good people on earth." The pessimist said, "I'll make you a bet." Optimist said, "What?" "You go down to earth and you find me 3 good people, and I'll take over guard duty at the Golden Gate for 1,000 years. And the optimist said, "Done." And the one angel, the optimist, went down to heaven and disguised himself as an old man. And he started walking the streets of the towns. Now in one town there lived 3 brothers. Their mother and father died during the plague, and they were all alone now. But they were all grown up. And these 3 brothers had a field outside of town where they worked as farmers. But they also had a special tree in the front yard. Their grandmother planted it for them when they were born, and that tree was a pear tree, and it gave the most delicious pears in the world. And they would pick those pears and make pear torts and pear pies. They loved their pear tree. It was their prized possession. And one day when the oldest brother was staying home and working around the house, and the 2 others went to farm, and he was watching the pear tree, this old beggar, the angel, came to the gate and said, "Excuse me, young man, I am so hungry. May I have a pear from your tree?" The young man said, "Well, the tree belongs to me and my brothers, and they've each taken a pear for their lunch to the fields. And I really can't give you one from the tree, but I'll give you the one I would have had for lunch. How's that?" And he gave the old man this big, beautiful pear and said, "You can have my lunch." And he walked back in the house. And the angel looked down at that pear, and he looked at the young man, and he thought, "That's one." Next day he came back. It was the middle brother. Same thing happened. The middle brother said, "Well, I can't give you one from the tree because that belongs to my brothers too, but I'll give you the one I was going to have for lunch." And he gave him his pear. And the 3rd day, the youngest gave his pear to the angel. And he had found 3 good people. And he won the bet. But he wanted to reward these 3 young men. So the next day he came dressed as a rich merchant. He says, "You may not recognize me, but I was the old man who came here, and in 3 days I received 3 pears from you, and I'm going to give you something special, a special gift." So he took the 3 brothers far away from the village. And there was a field, and he turned to the oldest, and here was this field filled with beautiful, beautiful sparrows flying around. He said, "Make your best wish, and this field is yours." The older brother said, "I wish that this was a vineyard with great arbors stretching out everywhere. And I was a merchant, and I made wine and sent my wine all over the world, and people called me master." And the angel clapped his hands, and there in front of him was a huge vineyard with a beautiful house and a place where the wine was stored and made. He said, "That's your best wish." And as the young man walked away, the angel said, "Remember God's poor." And the man nodded and ran to his new life. He took the 2nd brother to a field, and it was filled with swans and seagulls. And he said, "Give me your best wish." And the middle brother said, "I wish all these swans and seagulls were sheep, and I was a wool merchant, and I had a mill there, and I sent my wool around the world, and people called me master." And so the angel clapped his hand, and all seagulls and swans turned to sheep. There was the carding mill. There it was, all ready for his new house. And as he walked away, the angel said, "Remember God's poor." And the middle brother nodded, and he walked to his new life. So he took the youngest brother to the top of a hill, and there was the ocean, there were the woods. He says, "Give me your best wish." And the younger brother looked at the ocean, he looked at the woods, and he didn't say anything for a moment. And then he looked down and he said, "I would like someone to love me for who I am." just the way I am. And the angel, he was a bit surprised, and he said, I didn't see that one coming. Okay, wait a minute, let me look in the book. And he looked in the book. Wow, only 3 women in the world would love you for who you are, the way you are, and 2 of them are married. We better get going. And so they ran till they came to the king's palace. And his daughter was the one who could love him for who he was. And so he walked in, and the angel said, I have a suitor for your daughter. And the king said, not another one. I have 2 kings, 3 princes, and a duke in the other room, and they all want to marry my daughter. Oh, well, that's okay. Let's put them to a test. What kind of test? We'll take an olive branch, we'll pluck it from the tree, and we'll put the olive branches in the ground and put a name on each olive branch, and whoever's olive branch is still fresh tomorrow, that's the one who marries your daughter. And if the others are withered, they don't get to marry her. And the king thought that was a wonderful idea, so they did it. And the next morning, oddly enough, it was the young man, whose friend was the angel, whose olive branch was still fresh. It's good to have friends in high places. And so he was married to the princess. And so the princess and the young man, after the wedding feast, followed the angel. And they went deep in the forest, and there was a beautiful little cottage. He says, this is yours. Remember God's poor. And they walked in hand, so happy. Now, about 3 years went by, and the angel decided he would visit the 3 brothers again to see how they're doing. But he disguised himself as an old beggar again, and he went to the first one who made wine, and he begged, oh, please, a flask of wine. I'm so thirsty. Could you please give me some wine? And the brothers said, get off my property. I'll have my men beat you with sticks. How dare you beg for wine from me? And the angel looked at him and clapped his hands. And all the arbors of grapes disappeared, and the house disappeared, and the storerooms disappeared. And he said, go back to your pear tree. You forgot about God's poor. And he went to the brother who was a wool merchant. And he said the same thing. Oh, a piece of wool around my shoulders. I'm so cold. Get off my property. I'll set the dogs on you. I don't like beggars around me. And the angel clapped his hands, and the sheep disappeared, and the mill disappeared, and the house disappeared. And he said, you forgot God's poor. Go back to your pear tree. And then he went into the woods, and he found that little cottage, and he knocked on the door, and the young man opened the door, and he said, please, a little food. I'm so hungry. And the young man said, come in. And he brought him in, he sat him down. We don't have much, but whatever we have is yours. We have some hard bread, but when he pulled the bread out of the oven, it was a big loaf of soft, beautiful bread. And we don't have much food, just a thin stew, but when they ladled out the stew, it was thick with vegetables and meat. And the young man and his wife looked at each other. Said, we don't have anything to drink except spring water, but when they poured it, out came wine. And they were amazed. And the angel said, out of all of them, you're the only one who remembered God's poor. Come with me. And he led them down an avenue of pear trees, hundreds of them. And at the end was a big, beautiful house. And he said, you and your children and your children's children's children will live here forever because you knew and you remembered God's poor. The story of the best wish.